Good evening and welcome to Poets Cafe. I am your host for this evening, William R. Kraft Jr., and tonight our very special guest is Luzma. Good evening and welcome to the Poets Cafe.
Good evening. I'm delighted to be here.
My first my first statement slash question starting off is I have read your book for Christine, and I was very, very, very impressed with this work. And the question I have to ask is sometimes when we go through adversity, it helps us out. In the long run, do you believe that the adversity that you had to go through, that you explain in the introduction to this book, helped out your poetry in the long run?
Without a doubt. I think that all poetry arises from personal experience and personal observation.
Yeah.
And I strongly believe that without pain, sometimes it's impossible to write.
Yeah.
Because it is easier then for whoever is reading you to empathize
Yeah.
with what you've gone through.
Yeah. A painful poem is probably the easiest thing for almost anyone to identify with,
I think so also.
And they're about 1,000 times as powerful as a poem that's maybe not as painful.
Well, thank you.
As I said, I was very, very impressed with the book, and I would like to congratulate you for working through all the adversity that you had to go through.
Thank you.
Moving on, I noticed you had one poem that was dedicated to Sylvia Plath.
Yes.
And is there any special reason why you dedicated this poem to Sylvia Plath?
Yes, I have always been fascinated by the work of Sylvia Plath, and especially what she had to go through as a woman living at a time where there were no women's support groups, and all of her mental anguish that she went through, and lack of understanding from medical people and both her own family as to her own pain. And so I have always held her poetry in high esteem. There's an anecdote about that poem, and is that in order to write it, I looked a lot at many of the photographs of her grave in England. Yeah. And what I noticed was that many times the marker where it's supposed to say her name, that she's buried there, has been stolen. And sometimes the grass has grown and it hasn't been cut, and it looks sort of abandoned. And so I had to do some research on that, especially the matter of where she's buried and what her grave looks like, in order to write the poem. But it's a poem that I have read in many places with a great deal of success.
Yeah. Well, as I said earlier, that poem, as all of the poems in that collection, I really enjoyed it, and I'd like to thank you for translating that into English, so I could enjoy it.
Yes.
One other question that I had, as I said in the introduction to the book, you explain all the adversity that you had to go through. What do you feel? Because I talk to poets, and poets, more than anyone else, seem like the world is pitted against them.
Right.
What do you think that it is about the poetic mind or the poetic soul that helps us after we go through this adversity, step up and tell the world about this adversity? Because people who maybe weren't poetic would just keep all this pain to themselves.
Right. I think that that's a wonderful gift that we have, and in a sense I've always felt that, not to be self-aggrandized, but that poets are visionaries, and that probably that's why they're also persecuted many times, because they see things ahead of time that other people don't realize or they don't see, and so that's where the conflict rises from. But at the same time, we have this incredible capacity of being able to put this into paper or computer these days and be able to communicate with others that way. I have had many people, from youngsters to adults, the elderly, come up to me in different forums and
Yeah.
tell me how a specific poem of mine helped them
Yeah.
survive a crisis.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that is what the value of poetry is for
Yeah.
me.
Well, one thing, as we've basically been talking about, about the power of poetry and things like that. What do you feel that poetry's job, or what poetry is supposed to accomplish in the modern 20th century world? What do you think poetry is supposed to accomplish, basically?
Well, we are at the end of the century, and I feel that poets during this century have tried to warn us about things that are to happen.
Yeah.
They have been seers, they have been visionaries, and I think that I'll go back to my previous statement. I think that we have this specific gift that has been given to us
Yeah.
to see things in advance and sort of unfortunately sometimes play the Cassandra and be able to foretell what is coming. And I think that that's the role of the poet in the 20th century. And unfortunately, I'll repeat, many of us are not understood in our lifetime.
Yeah. That's the saddest thing about poets throughout history. Most poets aren't understood at all during their lifetime, and any success that they have achieved has always been posthumous success.
That's right.
There's something else that was on my mind. Here in our culture, in American culture, it's you can more or less say that it's anti-intellectual and anti-poetry to a certain extent.
Right.
What do you think causes this?
I don't know what's the cause of it. I think that we are a very, very pragmatic society.
Yeah.
That we want to see things done and accomplished, and there's very little time for rumination.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I always tell my students is that in Latin America, for example, poetry is the preferred genre.
Yeah.
And it's the one that is most sold.
Yeah.
But it's precisely because of the fact there is so much poverty and strife and those types of conditions that lend for the poet's voice to be heard and understood.
Yeah.
While in this country we don't have those disadvantages, let's put it that way, and we're more pragmatic. And we rather go through a short story or a novel that tells us in prose the things that we have to read, rather than to try to identify a poem and understand what was the poet feeling like, and so on and so forth.
That's very interesting, because you're the first person who's given me an answer like that when I've asked that question. The thing that I like to ask most of our guests is about form, and I noticed that sometimes in your poems you like to experiment.
Yes.
Sometimes with form. What do you think that this accomplishes, or why do you experiment with form? Is there any?
Yes, there's a reason. I was highly influenced by the concrete poems of the poets of the vanguard of Latin America. And many times they tried to use form in their poems with a specific non-political purpose.
Yeah.
But in my case, it's totally the opposite.
Yeah.
I tried to use the form of the poem to express some kind of a political message.
Yeah.
For example, one of my early poems is a poem that is written in the form of the word ghetto.
Yeah.
And it's about the music that one hears in a ghetto in Philadelphia when one goes there.
Yeah.
And so I think that what I try to inject into it is a political message.
Yeah. Well, social reform is definitely, as far as I'm concerned, a job of the poet.
That's right.
I would like to thank you very, very much for joining us on the interviews session of the Poets Cafe tonight. And we'll be right back in just a second. And you'll be up on the poetry stage performing your poem. So everyone out there, stay tuned.
Thank you. Poem that I'm going to be reading has a specific story behind it. It was written for a colleague of mine at Rutgers University who was one of the first people to be diagnosed from AIDS. And actually, there were a lot of people who wanted to deny the fact that he was dying of AIDS. I wrote this poem for him before he died, and I asked that if he died, the poem be put in the door to his office. The name of the poet that I wrote this poem for is Victor Fragoso, and he was one of the first Puerto Rican poets to deal openly with gay and lesbian issues. Victor's poem. Snow, snow outside, slow, concentric spirals, and inside love. But a brother dies and life goes on as usual. The pace slows down, but the traffic continues. I am asked to live while my brother begs me to release his hand. And only yesterday his sweat touched my life. Sweating, sweat, transformed today into snow and salt. Cascades are falling from the eyelids of your country. Where is the sun, the ocean, the sea breeze, the foliage, life? Green light, go on loving. Red light, stop living. Continue on a yellow light with caution. Do not little the grass with tears. Leave the path clear. Stop your sadness. Cursed country. And he buries himself in the snow, and I bury myself in the sand. And Julia takes his hand while I only ask him to live. Enamored of the river, he lets himself be guided by the hands of the water. My smallness, the minuscule strength of my hand is not enough. Her hand, so full of strength and death, reminds him of his mother, and he begins his march. Light flashing, life, death, snow, warmth, sun, rain, trees without leaves, red flamboyant trees, stop at once! A whistle, and a hand block his passage. 1 minute more and there will be a victory. And he crosses the finish line. First prize, 1981. And everyone feigns blindness to his memory. I write his name in the sand. Victor, in remembrance. And I await the undertow that will carry on his shoulders the winner to his throne of triumph, away from cold, far away from any contest, to the place where the sun will crown him with amapolas, yellow and red, to the land that formed him when the salty water from the sea touched his mother's womb. Adios. Another hand someday will write my name in the sand on the beach, and you will return on a wave to take me with you to the other side, to be sheltered by the island that now proclaims your name victoriously, because Puerto Rico nourishes you. The next poem that I'll be reading is a poem that I wrote, which is dedicated to Sylvia Plath. And the poem has also an anecdote to it. I was very bothered by the fact that Sylvia Plath still remain in England, and that the poet there has been no attempt to bring her remains into her country, which is the U.S. So she's buried in a foreign land. The poem is called To a Beautiful Illusion, for Sylvia Plath and to T.S. I look at a picture of your grave full of wild weeds, and I want to dig and press myself against your skeleton and kiss each emptiness and pretend that the grass growing is your sex. I want to take you out walking down the streets of L.A., Sylvia. I want you to smell the odor of gasoline in the air, a premonition of yours nobody understood, the pollution of our minds, of our bodies. I want you to see people line up for the psychiatrist, the young suicides, mothers who leave milk for their children while they sleep, mothers who had no choice, mothers abandoned, mothers empty, who weave another kind of stove gas every day without knowing that you had shown them a way. I want you to walk arm in arm with me and raise your voice from the skeleton and whisper in my ear softly, arousingly, that you want to make love of the beach at Cape Cod under the sun, and in Provincetown, city of ultraviolet power, where once they tried to lock you up, where you return today laughing at my side to watch barges and whales. It's February again, Sylvia. For the time being, it's not freezing. Stamps have gone up in price, and they have a different image, but they can still be bought in the middle of the night by nocturnal poets to send their poems home to the mother. Come, take my arm, walk with me. I too am returning this February from far away. Let's make love on the shore while the waves break and penetrate, waves sent to us from a faraway island. I see your abandoned grave, and I want to press myself and kiss and pretend, and the salt and the calcic fill my mouth. And I know, Sylvia, that on this night of this February, warmer than usual, I love you. And the poem ends with a note: when will we bring the remains of Sylvia Plath home? This is another poem that has a gay or lesbian motif, and it's called For Ellen. I don't know how to write you this poem in a language of which you don't understand the word, but this nerve opened between my legs to receive your weight on a freezing night in Minnesota asked me, begs me to write. Painful nerve, nerve resistance to pressing against a man, muscle that my body forgot how to contract. And while you sought shelter between my legs and fell asleep, that nerve in my right leg bore your years, the polio pain of your legs, and I felt you close to my sex. Still I lay while you hung suspended over my nerve like a trapezoid, nerve weak in your legs, strong in mine. And gradually, pain by pain, you entered all my pores. Like a plant, you took root and drank from my veins and became daughter, lover, mother, sister, daughter. And passing down through the canal that never stretched to give life, you became life between my fingers, salt, water, sea, and today, a poem. This poem that I'll be reading now has also a story. Sandra Maria Esteves, the Puerto Rican poet, and myself have been writing poems to each other, and this is the last installment. It is called Music de Orsay. I will read a part of it for you. To Sandra Maria Esteves. My pain, Sandra, is mine. I stitch my wounds and mend my entrails, torn, teared, ripped by hands that have no caring for me or you. I take on others' pain, so I took on yours and rock it against within my heart in such a strong devotion, in silence, in absence not seen, like air, that no one saw my bleeding. Dissonant ears heard words that were not mine. They never heard my moans in seeing lesser minds exalted and bestowed, and yours ignored. And if I dared defy you in a poem, it was just sure enough because I cared. I cared too much. I love intensely the you that chose another road parallel to mine. Envy, Sandra, is putrefaction. And envy rose in masculine minds because I built my side of a bridge of words between our lives with just one single poem, one repetitive stanza which I just read and read, hoping for you to hear and join your words to mine. Complete this structure that now connects us firmly. Because you have responded back, the link is made. I sit in pain, looking at Claude Monet's Musée d'Orsay exact location. Purple flowers like my wounded flesh, his bluish garden like a healing wound, and the green that builds his background, his backdrop. This last I wish for you, green palms to soothe you, green morivivi to survive, green waters of a sea normally blue, green, green everywhere because Sandy, it was in green, in Puerto Rican hope of foliage intertwined on country roads to give us shade, that I defied your poem with my answer. Thank you.
Take this one last opportunity to thank Luzma for joining us tonight on the Poets Cafe, and I'd like to remind everyone out there to tune in next week when we're going to have a 4th of July holiday special, the Poetry of America. We're going to be looking at the poetry of America from all perspectives, critical, in favor of, and everything. So make sure you tune in next Friday at 8 p.m. to catch that. And one last reminder about the Poets Cafe poetry readings. There's going to be on August 17th over 20 poets reading their poems here in Ithaca. Call 256-5326 for more information. Thank you very much and good evening.